All right, Rebecca, here we are live. We are live on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and who knows where else. Honestly, we're live a lot of places, but really glad to have you here. We're going to start recording the podcast here just shortly, but wanted to just say welcome, and I cannot wait to chat with you. So give me just a second. We're going to give some people some time to come on, as I know they will. And we will jump in. And if they're not, they're going to listen on the podcast anyway. So it's all good. So give me just a second, and I am going to hit record on the audio file for the podcast. So, all right, here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. All right, Rebecca, how are you? I am so excited for the listeners to hear from you. I know I've heard from you. I've heard you speak. I've been involved in ESSDACK, which is something you have been such an instrumental part of. So how are you? Welcome, and tell us the Rebecca story.
Hey, Matthew, I'm like pretty stoked. So I'm trying to let the energy move through my body so that I can just be present and not like all nervous, right? So the Rebecca story, well, when you think about trauma and the space that we get to be in together, I have 8 aces. My mom has 9. I dropped out of high school when I was 16. I was going to go out into the world and find something like the girls had on the other side of town, right? But I fell madly in love with someone that was 3 years older than me and fresh out of the penitentiary. So on my 16th birthday, we left state. I didn't call or come home for 3.5 years. And Matthew, you know what I found. I didn't find a house like girls had on the other side of town, right? Pretty quickly, I realized, oh, I'm doing far worse than what was done for me. And I was in that relationship, in that marriage for 13 years, extreme cycle of domestic violence and chaos and addiction. So at 29 years old, I got out of that marriage by the grace of God, and all this brokenness, homeless, no car, no job, no money, high school dropout, and pregnant with my first baby. So here comes this perfect little person, right? And I swore I was never going to be a single mom. And I'm like, I got to do something different than what my mom was able to do for me. So I enrolled in college full time and went back to work full time, and my new baby cried full time. So fast forward a decade, I was still in college trying to get a 4-year degree to be a high school art teacher. Had 3 little boys at this point, and I was in a trailer park in a small community in Kansas, in a trailer house that I'd bought for $1,000 that should have been condemned, right? And like, it was not a safe place for kids to live. And so I was definitely underground. I was 7 months clean and sober, working nights as a bartender at a bowling alley and trying to fight my way to get this degree. And my oldest son and my youngest son were like climb the walls wild. And I just knew it's because I was a really bad mom. But there was a lady in the trailer park that said, hey, go to this church. They've got some diapers, right? And, I'm like, what do I got to do? She said, just go in there and ask. And so I started frequenting that church, developed a relationship there with the lady that ran that outreach. And long story short, she got me to sign up for a poverty project that they were doing to help families. I was super suspicious, right? Like, she's like, oh yeah, it'll be great. Family style meal, kids go to childcare, parents go to a class. There's all these middle-class people there for support. And I'm like, that sounds horrifying to me, but out of this debt that I owe you, I'm going to go. And that's where everything changed for me. Because of that project, I was able to finish my degree. And right after I did that, there was a job opening at that poverty project. And so they hired me. And from 2012 to 2017, I got to be a part of building the largest, most successful poverty project like that in the country.
Wow.
Getting more families completely out of poverty than any other project had ever done. And I also got to become the diaper lady in that story. So, and the way that I got into this work was that my oldest son and my youngest son, I had all 3 kids in one elementary building at one time. And my oldest and my youngest were the kids that were taking over the building, flipping desks, running out of classrooms. And but as I got into this project with all these middle-class people that were wrapping these relationships around me, like I felt something changing in my own brain.
Wow.
I could feel it, right? And so I started on this journey for like what's going on with my brain. And that's how I found the ACEs science, the trauma science, the neuroscience. And then ultimately that led me to the science of resilience. And through that journey, I was able to start bringing poverty and resilience and trauma into schools to really change things.
So I have to ask you, when you first heard the science, when you first heard this information, what did you think? Because I know that we all had that paradigm shift. We all had that experience of like, wait, what? What was that like for you? Because I mean, if you were in it and you had experienced it and you were on some levels even in it at the time, what was that like? I mean, what did you think?
You know, there was a lot of like, I want to say freedom for me. Like when I looked at the ACE study and I was like, oh, I have 8 of these things. And then I saw kind of the health indicators and the behavior things that came along with it. I was like, oh, no wonder. Like, here's the science, here's my story. And but in college to be a teacher, they taught me birth to 5 brain science. And they tell us that your brain's fixed by age 5. And after that, like, which is really kind of like really emotionally heavy when you're going to be a teacher. Cause like, we don't even get them until they're 5. But 0 to 5 for me was really intense. And so I thought, well, addiction, 0 to 5, like I'm screwed. But I felt something changing in my own brain and I was able to see forward. I was learning to be less reactive. I was more trusting, like I could feel it. And I kept talking about it. I was actually on stages thinking, I'm not a researcher, but I'm telling you relationships change brains. And so when I found that, it just was this huge moment of hope for me and my people. Like that maybe we weren't lost causes. You know, when I really follow Harvard Institute for Developing Child, like that's the resilience science that I follow. And I just realized that brains want to heal and can heal at any age. And whether you're young or older, you need access to safe, supportive, available adults. And that we can get this wiring to do what it's supposed to do, right? And so for me, Matthew, it just changed everything. And then it gave me a way to start to help schools really unpack the punishment deal that's going on, the behaviorism, right? Because people want to do it different. But what I found in schools, especially in high schools, Matthew, is that there's this belief system that kids who come from tough places, they really have just been like allowed to run wild. And we got to get a narrow line and keep them on it. And if they get off, we got to knock them back on, because if we don't, we're signing them into prison. So it comes from a place of love, right? It's not mean people. It's like, this is what they need. And so the science helps people start to let go of that, because that belief system is really what's perpetuating the school to prison pipeline. But the folks that are a part of that don't understand that. So the science is like, here you go. Here's the neuroscience. Here's the data, right?
And even with that, paradigm shifting it's difficult when what we've been taught in what I say teacher school isn't what I was taught in teacher school, is not what I know now. The strategies that we were taught in teacher school are certainly not what I use now, and not what I encourage my staff and in some levels require my staff to even do, because we know better and we have to do better. And I love that you said that people aren't doing these things out of malice, right? At least you hope not. They're really thinking that it's the best thing to do. And I'm going to be honest, I run into this all the time, even in my own building, right? We gotta recenter on why are we doing this the way we're doing, because it's really easy in the time of COVID, in April, almost May, in the middle of state assessments, to go back to that. They just need to listen, right? They need to, it's easy. And I can feel that even in my own building happening. It's like, whoa, we got to step back, you all, we got to step back. We've just changed the whole environment of every kid. We've added kids that haven't been at school all year. We've changed their schedule. We're putting a test in front of them required by our district and state. Why are we shocked that they're dysregulated? Why are we shocked that we're having these bubbled up? Now we've got to invest in that time and relationship to make sure we're there co-regulating kids. I mean, it takes time to get that paradigm shift. So what are some challenges that you've ran into, right? When you're in this work with schools and you're changing paradigms, what are some of the challenges that you've seen often?
Well, I think one of the things that is really important is the term trauma-informed kind of, it just reads to people like, oh, I know about the ACE study, so I'm trauma-informed. And folks don't understand the progression because we haven't been really good at spelling that out, right? So for me, like I hear an administrator and they're like, oh yeah, no, we're trauma-informed. We had a lady come talk about ACEs once. And so people don't realize that it is a deep foundational way to design your climate and your culture. It's not a canned curriculum. It's not a program. And it's hard work. And it really starts with the adults to adults. And there's some real courageous things that have to happen. And so that's one thing that I think needs to just be said over and over again. You know, you really move on that trauma aware to trauma sensitive to responsive. And the last stop is informed, when it informs everything we do. The other thing that I would say was that when I realized early on, Matthew, that buy-in was a big deal, that staff has initiative fatigue, and the older staff will tell the younger staff, like, honey, just keep your head down. This will come and go too. And they're protecting themselves against these different initiatives coming that are going to save us, right?
Right.
They're hard to learn, that create a lot of stress in the buildings that, you know. And so I recognized that getting buy-in, 75 to 80% buy-in from our staff and paras, was a critical component to sustainability. But then I started getting really good at getting buy-in, and then I would leave the building and I'd be like, okay, they got it, right? But they didn't have it. And so what I began to recognize was that for sustainability, folks need a longer term process, because teachers have so much crap that's being dumped on them, and the system is archaic, right? So we got layers upon layers upon layers. And so folks need a longitudinal process to really help them go from I want to be different to now I am different and I'm not going back, right? So it takes time and leadership. And you know, as I know, Matthew, you're still at your same school. You're still at Fall Hamilton, but that's more uncommon than it is common that you have an administrator that stays, right? So, and then the co-care part with staff, I thought, you know, my people, families in poverty in trauma were like the ones, but then I got in with schools and I'm like, oh, wow, everybody's experiencing brain issues. You know, like, you guys are messed up, right? Like, oh, we got to start here with you.
Isn't it a great thing when you realize that it's normal to not be normal, what normal is? It's like nobody is okay. Yeah. Nobody is normal. And I think that in itself is a conversation that staff need to understand about ourselves when we're in schools, that even in schools, you all were not okay. I love that. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so giving people language to talk about the pound of flesh mentality when we're triggered, to understand that this is a brain issue. It's not a character issue, that there's really no bad guys, and that hurt people, but heal people. And we're craving vulnerability. We're craving spaces where we can show up and be ourselves and people won't run away. Like, our adults are craving the same thing our kids need, right? So,
I mean, it's powerful. It's powerful. And I think some of the biggest barriers that I've seen in this work, especially as a school administrator, is the personal barrier of letting go in fear that what I'm going to try isn't going to work like what I used to do. And I think a lot of that comes down to many of our teachers are perfectionists, right? Like, that's part of our ingrained piece of, like, we want to do everything well. And I think another piece is that we are ingrained to get quick results. And sometimes this work, you do not get quick results. What I say is we're planting seeds sometimes, and this can take a long time to manifest, right? And I could share story after story of students who came to my school, and when they first came, I mean, I'm telling you, it's very high need and explosive, to now following their parents on social media and getting messages with them graduating into high school and playing sports and being successful, and like that, what goes on in my school does not show the outcome that many kids are going to get to experience. So I think being cognizant that sometimes this takes time is something that educators struggle with.
Matthew, that's really beautiful, because another thing that's happening for what you're doing is that those kids, when they grow up and start having kids, some of the DNA stuff that turns up and turns down, like you guys turn some of that down so that when they have children, there's not going to be this kind of automatic, we need to be fearful or on guard in elementary school, right? Because the story of mom and dad is that we were safe in elementary school and we were loved, even when we messed up, right? And so my oldest son, intense stuff. And I had an elementary building. Those teachers wrapped around me. They loved me. They said, we don't know what this is, but we're with you. And he's now a junior, and he left that elementary building after multiple events, knowing that he was loved and adored.
I mean, that's it. That's the goal.
And 6th grade, they hired 2 extra people, like middle school.
Yeah.
The principal said, okay, we're going to hire these 2 extra paras, And like, I'm not kidding. A month into 6th grade, I got this phone call, like, why did we hire these extra people?
Oh, it's awesome.
Right. Because so it does pay off. And I always help people understand that you're building little trees up here that no one can take away from kids. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But those come from that relational part. And that's how you get them activated. And that's what we want to do, right? We want to build brains, and absolutely want kids to do well with math and reading. It's going to be super helpful, right? But sometimes we don't get to see the fruit, like you said, from the little brain trees that we're getting to grow that will always be there later, right?
You know, and I just put out on social media, I saw this little quote, and it was about something about, you know, hiring or working with people who compliment you, and it's not a challenge. And I changed it to classrooms. And the reason I did that is because I went back to when I was a kid, and I can remember the teachers wanted me to act like they wanted me to act, right? It wasn't that, hey, you've got strengths and let's see how we can pull those strengths. Matter of fact, I found it, and I've talked about it on the podcast before. The biggest irony was standing on a stage right outside of London, England, and speaking to a large conference and thinking, I was told my whole school career to be quiet. And now I'm literally standing here, right? I mean, that's what we need to be doing. And part of our mission at my school is to ensure kids reach their fullest potential as leaders. I mean, that's part of our core. It's part of our mission statement, because every kid has genius. And Rebecca, if you go back to your experience and go back to even your children's experience, what you said about the experience of your son was that he went through some really hard things, but he always knew he was loved.
Right.
I mean, that is the core of this work, is it not?
That is the core deal. It really is about love and trust and safety and connection and worthiness, right? I'm supposed to be here. This planet needs me. I'm important. And if you have a lot of trauma, like worldviews just get really dark because you're on the defense all the time, right? And so I think that curiosity and just figuring out, like you said, each kid's genius and helping them to understand that you have this in you, and we're going to create a space for this to come out. Let us know what you need. And sometimes you got all these defense systems that you've accumulated that are really important. But, you know, and that's what we help folks with our school and family peace process understand, is that defense systems in the River of Cruelty are part of surviving the river. For human beings, though, we tend to hang on to our defense systems even after we're out of the river, right? And then they have problems, we get a lot of consequences. But what's really powerful, Matthew, is our beliefs and our attitudes. Because, and that's where we have a river map that we use. And when you get to the beliefs and the attitudes, I always ask staff, I'm like, what are some of the beliefs and attitudes that you hear about that kid? And we'll start making lists. And I'm like, right there, that list of all those things you hear, that's what gives us permission to throw that kid in the river.
Whew. Whew. You just hit me in the heart, Rebecca. That was a heart punch. Please say that again. Please say that one more time. I was in the midst of writing it, And I'm thinking, because I'm talking to my staff in 2 weeks, and I want go right back and say that one more time if you can.
So this comes from the Family Peace Initiative in Topeka, Kansas, who trained us to do this work in schools. But you have the River of Cruelty, right, Matthew? And the thing about a river is it starts somewhere and it goes somewhere. And then once it hits the ocean, it cycles back, right? So it just is a cycle. And it's a metaphor for how folks get from generation to generation, parent to child, teacher to student, cruelty gets handed down. So, you have a list of all the types of cruelties that a kid can go through. And out of that comes adverse feelings. And kids aren't taught how to manage those adverse feelings. And so at some point, all of us were taught kind of to act happy when we're sad and ticked off when we're afraid. And so nobody teaches us to manage our adverse feelings. And so then we build these defense systems, right? Because one of the best strategies when I'm having a lot of fear is to give that fear away. So kid flips a desk. Suddenly you're afraid, Matthew, right? Defense systems, eating, drinking, smoking, yelling, running out of classrooms. Those are defense systems for emotional loads. The problem with our defense systems, they help us survive. We don't want to judge them, but people hang on to them for too long and they turn into like life-altering consequences, right? And out of the River of Cruelty comes these beliefs and attitudes. Some are about society and some are about us. Like, I'm bad. I don't matter. I'm stupid. But when you do it with staff and you ask them, just give me a list of beliefs and attitudes that you hear about that kid. And they'll start saying they're lazy, they've got bad parents, they don't care, they're spoiled, like whatever. And I'm like, boom, right there. That belief system, that's what gives us permission to throw that kid in the river. And the cycle starts all over again.
I mean, that is so powerful. I know my assistant principal just commented, don't judge defense systems. And I'm going to put it up there. We just had conversations today of, how do we get this across of this isn't a personal, it's an overload of emotion. The dysregulation isn't I'm choosing to disrupt. It is truly, in what you said, a defense system for our emotional loads. That is information educators have to reiterate, whether it is a mantra in our heads every day when we're co-regulating with students. It's something, that number one paradigm shift is one that we have to have an overload in education. That is the one thing we have to understand, of course, back with the science and the neuroscience. Yep. But man, that's powerful.
Well, and Matthew, when you kind of dig around in there a little bit too, what I found when I started training teachers on this model that we're using, because it's experiential, because I'm like, we got reactive kids, we got teachers that believe, but teachers are still becoming reactive. Like, what are we missing, right? We're missing something. It's not just enough to know. Like, we have our famous, know better, do better. And I'm like, but we know better, but we're still struggling to do better. Right. What's happening? And so I thought, when we do this kind of the school and family peace framework stuff with teachers, like, they don't have trauma, like some do, but not many. And Matthew, what I have come to figure out through this work is that nobody gets out of childhood for free. Nope. And while you don't have these 10 ACEs, right? All of us have experienced cruelty at some form or another. And really what comes out of it is we get these shadow messages, and we kind of protect our shadow messages like a Pandora's box, and we build tripwires. And when people get tripped that tripwire, we kind of lose our mind, right? So one teacher's like, I don't care if Johnny steals a granola bar off my desk. Johnny's probably hungry. And another teacher's like, stealing just sends her into orbit. Well, those are all attached. Those are tripwires attached to shadow messages. And you said teachers, I don't think teachers are perfectionists. I think perfectionism is a defense system.
I like that.
Right? Perfectionism, idealism, minimizing, like those are all defense systems, and that are typically attached to something. And it's kind of the identity that people, like, without this identity, who am I? And we all have this. Like, it's not just teachers, it's all human beings. And it's called our cover story, right? And if you get to where that cover story kind of starts to come apart, like, that's not safe. Wow. Right? Would you still love me, Matthew, if you know that I don't have it all together in my classroom? Like, my love and belonging is at stake here.
I mean, and I think that goes back to what you said at the very beginning about vulnerability, right? Is that we want that vulnerability to be our true self, but the conditions have to be right in order for people to have that zone of comfortability to be. Now, I'm not one of those people, because I am vulnerable to a fault probably sometimes, but it comes down to, wow, I mean, it's so key, and it's key inside of buildings, or inside of schools and outside of schools and in the world and in business and everywhere.
It's actually a conduit for bonded relationship, right? And this is what, when we do a 2-chair exercise around the cover story, and we're like, here's the stuff I want you to know about me, and here's the stuff I hide. Whenever people get in the second chair, everybody else, you just feel it, like they're like, oh my gosh, thank God you're just as messed up as I am. But that's the stuff that bonds us. It's not the stuff they read when we go up for a keynote, right? Like, yeah, yada, yada, yada. Did you know my car is filthy? My toilets haven't been scrubbed in 2 weeks. You know, like,
right.
Those are the things that, and I worry every day that I'm not enough and that I'm going to get found out, right? Like,
right.
That's the human experience. And that's what brings us closer together. And I think it's really important. It's really worth saying too. I think check-ins with kids, Matt, are tools that a lot of schools are using, but I don't know if people really understand why we're doing check-ins.
Right.
So, I think there's this idea that we're going to make sure the kid didn't have a bad night last night. Check-ins are to teach emotions in a way and to keep them from bottling up, right? So it's really about, because when you think about the river, like, we can't always stop the cruel things that happen in the morning, the night before, on the playground, but we can teach kids to let that emotional energy be acknowledged and move. Otherwise, it gets trapped in our body, right? Otherwise, it gets trapped sometimes so much that it comes out in an explosive way. And so, but here's what I tell teachers, because when they're doing check-ins, Matthew, a lot of times what I notice is it starts out pretty good, but a couple weeks in, the teacher's like, I'm glad today. And all the kids are like, I'm glad. So back to your point about vulnerability, the leader in the room, the adult in the room, is going to create the safety through their own vulnerability of, I'm on here with, I'm feeling pretty afraid right now, Matthew, that I've talked way too much on your program. And you don't have to rescue me. It's okay to let that fear move through my body, right? So I would say to educators out there that are doing check-ins, if you've had a lot of trauma, at some point, our thinking brain, our emotional brain, and our body start to come apart. So check-ins are a way to help kids access mad, sad, glad, and afraid, and start to bring some of that stuff back together. And it's also how we teach kids that it's okay to be sad when you're sad, and it's okay to be afraid when you're afraid. You don't have to act mad, and you don't have to act happy. And we also don't have to rescue you. You can just experience those emotions and let them kind of move and do what they do, and we can support you, right? Anyways, I do feel like I'm talking way too much.
No, and that's the whole point. I don't want to talk. You're on here, so I can hear you. You don't need to hear me, but I do want to tell one story because I think it fits to this. And many people have seen the Edutopia video about our check-in and check-out system, and we have revamped the check-in and check-out system. But I do want to talk about my mentee, Peyton, in that video, and how I think he's in high school, which just blows my mind.
Right.
Nonetheless, there were days where I swear to you, I needed him as much as he needed me. And there were days when he would come in and I would say, you know what, Peyton, I'm having a really tough morning this morning. And I didn't share, unload, but I did express. And you know what? I swear to you, unprovoked, he would check on me throughout the day.
Yep.
He would say, Mr. Portel, you okay? And I'm like, dude, thank you so much.
That's a process.
Yeah, it is. And when he was having a bad day, he would say, I'm having a really rough morning. I would say, dude, I got you, but we got this. You know what to do. And I would check, you doing all right? He'd be like, I'm doing good. Or no, I'm not doing okay. Well, let's go walk and talk.
Let's go walk and talk.
Walk and talk is probably one of my favorite strategies that I do with so many kids. When I can see let's just walk and talk. And that's it. And that is all it takes sometimes to let the students release what you just said. All of those things come out in various ways. Sometimes it's stories. Sometimes it's actually addressing the emotions that they're feeling, because we do teach emotional vocabulary. But some of these things are just, they don't take any program, like you said. They don't take any money. They just take, hey, let's try these 3 things this coming year. Let's do walk and talks with kids. When we see them come in the door, let's just check in on them, right? Hey, come chat with me. You look frustrated. You know how many times I do that? Or are you feeling something? Or how are you feeling today? I'm feeling frustrated. Well, let's go figure it out. Just for kids to say, somebody noticed that, really grounds so many kids. So many.
Matthew. And, I have folks too that are like, oh my gosh, what if you open a can of worms? And I'm like, well, they're just worms. Because I think I think a lot of staff are like, I'm not equipped to deal with this if a kid is having, especially when you get to older kids, right, Matthew? But you're so right. Just letting them say it, express themselves, acknowledge it, validate. What else do you need from me? I'm good. Thanks. It's huge.
Hey, and when I have relationships with the kid, I have relationships with all the kids at school, and there's some I have really close, and they'll do something, and I swear to you, I'll say, I need a minute right now because I'm really frustrated.
Yeah.
And I just need to take a minute so I can get myself back to calm so we can come up with a solution to this, to what happened. Because I am frustrated, because I am irritated or angry. I express that, and I take a minute and I do all of those things that we ask our kids to do, because at the end of the day, you said it, we are models, and I am not above, I'm way far from perfection. I tell kids all the time, do you know how I became a principal? Because I spent all of my elementary school in an office. They're like, what? I'm like, I used to get in trouble, and they can't believe it. And I mean, it inspires some kids to be like, wait, I've been getting in trouble, I can still be. Absolutely. And I think that's so, so important.
Yeah, I agree, Matthew. And the other, I want to just kind of affirm you too, because I saw something that you were doing with parents, and it was probably pre-COVID, but it was, circling up, and you have parents come in, and I was like, oh my gosh, because everybody's like, well, how do we get the parents? Da, 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 da. Well, that is so important. Get in a circle, ask some powerful questions, teach people the circle process, right? And ask and listen and acknowledge folks. And that's the stuff that if we can do that more often and realize this is where the gold lies. It's in these interactions before things break down.
Absolutely. And the first question we ask, what are your hopes and dreams for your child? That's the first question we ask. And you know what? Every parent has hopes and dreams for their kids. And that one created vulnerability and emotion. Parents became emotional. And that's when the staff that attended and the parents that attended, you could feel a connection, because it was like, and let's be honest, Rebecca, there are stereotypes of families who live in poverty. There are, that they don't care, that,
they don't love their kids.
They don't love their kids, or they mistreat them, right? There's these paradigm shifts that we have. And when you hear parents talk, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's what I want for not only the students, but my own child.
Matthew, I really appreciate that, and what I found is that so many teachers are like, oh, I'm fine with the kids, I'm terrified of parents, and parents are terrified of teachers. And at the end of the day, we just need to sit down together and realize we all want the same thing. And, but, and I've worked really hard. I built a poverty simulation from my perspective for schools, and to help people understand parents in poverty are not anti-education. They are just pro-survival.
That's exactly right.
So your survival things that you have to deal with will supersede the things you need to show up for to help your kid.
Absolutely.
And so that is so critical. And, Matthew, I bet you I have a school that when I walk in there, it doesn't matter if parents have been smoking a bunch of cigarettes and they just woke up and they're still in pajamas, or it's the PTA mom in the building. They walk in the door, everybody greets them and acknowledges them, and they're excited to see them. The secretary treats everybody the same. That's what we want, right? Every parent everywhere in the world loves their children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care where you're from, right? But one of the biggest ways we dehumanize, Matthew, is saying that so-and-so, this group, whatever, doesn't love their kids. It's one of the fastest way to dehumanize people, right? And the other thing that I think is really important to say is that, somewhere not too far back in our history, we turned schools into police, right? With the child welfare system. And I know it was done with the best intentions, but what happened, because parents I know when I lived in that trailer house with those 3 kids, and the trauma, I've given my kids trauma. I have hurt my kids in ways from my old lifestyle that I will never be able to make up for. But the people that I needed the help from, I was terrified. So you drive all this stuff underground, right? Because families can't access the helping professions because we're afraid if we do access you, what's going to happen, Matthew?
Yeah,
you're going to take
you're going
it
to report it.
right?
Right,
Like,
right.
and in Midwest Kansas, we've had lots and lots and lots of families that lose their kids because their lights are shut off, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, how much money does this cost a taxpayer? Why didn't we turn the damn lights back on? Just turn the lights on. I mean, why is this anyways? So,
and I want to reinforce that because just today, our mayor of Nashville announced that they are fully funding schools. And it's the first time in the history of our school system that we will be fully funded. But I want to go to something else. Our city received ESSER funds for rent. Do you know what they did? They went to the court and paid all of the court fines and covered everything to get everybody out of the court system. And I thought, brilliant. Brilliant. They took the barrier out. They helped just remove all of that. It's like we've got people doing the best they can.
Yes.
And it's this admiration that I have for this type of thinking because, again, people are doing the best they can. And if we continue to think that, even though it's not the best we think they can do, because we don't know, right? And I think that unrelenting positive regard that we must have for not only our students, but our parents, our colleagues, our principals, our superintendents, like everyone. If we can continue to just assume that, as opposed to assume they need to do this way, or they need to do it that way, or the parent should do this, or why isn't the parent doing that? That just creates so many barriers, and to be honest, bias for a variety of reasons is such a major issue in our schools.
It does. And it goes both ways. Like, right. Like, I was friends with a guy from a poverty project, and he's a older retired school teacher, white middle-class guy. And he said he'd been in our poverty project as a friend to families for a while. And he's like, I was at the barbershop and they were talking all bad about poor people. And I got so bad. And I said, don't worry about it, Marlon. I said, we're talking all kinds of crap on you guys in the trailer park too. Like, so it does go both ways because
True.
know how to have relationship, right? So what you did with your parent circle there, we don't care about all this. Just come together. Let's ask some questions that let us all know that we all belong here and that we're all worthy of love and belonging, right? And so I just get so excited. And there are murmurs, and there are starting to be little rivers, little outlets where we're really starting to rethink child welfare, to where we are, because right now what happens is you have stressed out systems that are hurting for money and stressed out people working in them, and they're really hyper vigilant. And we take kids and we wrap all this stuff around kids, and we tell the parents, well, this is probably the worst thing that's ever happened. You go over there and get it together.
Right.
And instead of wrapping around the parents too, like, isn't this our, so it's just, I'm excited because I think people are finally starting to recognize and that we have a long ways to go, but we could ask different questions. We could start asking different questions.
Oh my goodness, yes. And having served as a foster parent and was told don't send any more pictures, I did anyways, because it was this like, but this is still their mom.
That's their mom.
And in the oldest of our two boys that we did foster, that is he wants to go to see his mom, and he can't. And he's only 11, but he said, the day I turn 18, I'm going. And I said, the day you turn 18, I will pick you up. Because at the end of the day, that is what he needs, right? Yeah. And I think that sometimes, and I saw this from a foster parent's point of view, and I have an empathetic heart. It's just how I operate. And I could see from the mom's perspective all of the various barriers and challenges that were set in front of her that if just given resources and support, the trajectory could have changed.
You know, and Matthew, I know that for a fact because I was that mom, and by the grace of God, I never lost my kids, right? But I didn't have all my wiring up here. I had overwiring here, right? And and I just think because, you know, all the trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma, then you lose your kids and you're given this whole list of stuff you've got to accomplish with no resources and no people, right? Like, I mean, it's like, what do you do? And so I don't know. I just, you know, and we've worked with so many families. There's a ton of Rebeccas running around in our towns, right? There's a ton of human capital that if we just set the table right and say, hey, come help us, we need to solve poverty and you're the expert. Come sit down with us and let's do this together. Like, Matthew, I mean, when we say we're getting families out of poverty, we're getting people out of financial poverty. Like, they're getting themselves out. We just create the projects, and they're becoming good friends with middle-class people in our communities. So we're bridging this. We're changing stories, not just changing lives, but changing community stories about who we are and who we really are, right?
Wow.
And so I don't know. I just get so excited. And trauma-informed schools are a big part of this because we can heal brains. And we can do it through education. We can do it through churches. We can do it through nonprofits. Like, we can do it through child welfare.
It's all sectors. I mean, trauma-informed work isn't just education. That just happens to be what this podcast is about. But we know trauma-informed communities are truly what create resilience, right? And I'm proud to say that I live in a city that is working towards that goal, where even our juvenile justice system, I had our juvenile court judge on here. Judge Calloway was talking about how she's trying to shift the paradigm between our mental health and our local nonprofits. We have ACE Nashville. I mean, it is major work, and that work is happening all over the country. And I think that we're finally seeing traction of like, wait, this isn't just a one sector piece. This is a community-based process that we all must be a part of.
And it really is courageous and hard work, but it's not complicated. And it's about people, like building people, and all of these kind of, I don't want to say humanitarian, but it's really about relationships and trust and community and getting rid of the us and them, right? Because at the end of the day, Matthew, it's just us. There's no us and them.
That's right.
That's like the best deceit that has ever hit the human race, is that there's us and there's them, and there's not. I mean, there just isn't. We've got to come together. And I know that sounds cliche, but man, we're craving that. And we don't need a hill to save us. Like, we don't. We can do this ourselves.
That's exactly right. And I think just what one of the listeners said, time and effort, really, it's time, effort, relationships. And let's be honest, it isn't complicated, but it isn't easy. It's weird.
Not easy. It's simple, but it's hard, right?
So true.
And it takes some kahunas, to have, like, to really be like, this isn't okay anymore. And I'm going to be over here. And, you talk a lot about disruptors, Matthew, and it isn't disruptors in the way of fighting. It's disruptors in the way of, I'm going to stand here today and be different. And I want you to do it with me. Right.
And I think the middle schooler in me just prepared me for this platform in the world, because I didn't care then, and I don't really care now whether people are negating or trying to fight against. I think I'm naturally born as a disruptor, not a fighter. I've never been I've been in a fight in 5th grade. It wasn't a fight because Mikey Hollingshead made me eat grass by putting my face into the playground. But I didn't fight. But I've never been in a fight. But it is about, hey, if we see that it's not working, right, then let's try to do it differently, because we need to do it differently. And let's be honest, things that we have been doing are things that we have done for a really long time that didn't and hasn't worked. And so
I think, Matthew, definitely that. But what we have to also acknowledge is that it has worked for some.
Absolutely.
And it hasn't worked for a more vulnerable population, right? But what we have going on now with our mass incarceration, I mean, it's not sustainable, right? It's the wrong thing to do, but we really have to ask these big questions, because, as somebody from poverty that sit on the outside, in Midwest communities, like, it does work for some. It wasn't working for me and my kind, right? But I'm always really interested when I go into schools, Matthew, to look for the folks that give us the most resistance. Like, that's what I built all my trainings for, is to get to those folks. Because there's certain folks that'll just come with you so easy. Like, yeah, it's time. This is the right thing. But there's a small pocket of folks in every school that aren't buying it. And so I have built the work that I do to get to those people. Because if we can shift them, Matthew, everything else is easy, right?
And I don't remember what guest it was on here, but on this podcast, and I even read it. I know Melissa McPeters on the Trauma Informed Educators Network always brings this up of, the system's actually working exactly how it was designed.
Yeah.
Right? It's working exactly how it was designed. And it's an oppressive system of hierarchy, right? I've just read The Caste, a book that's about how our systems are built on hierarchy and the caste system. And so I think if we start to understand and know that the way our systems are built is oppressive and is designed to work for some, then we realize it really isn't working for anyone.
Right.
Because it's not working for all. And I think what you said, there's not them and us, it's just us. So if it's not working for some, then it's not working for us.
And, you know, for folks that have a really big blind spot, that it is working for them and it's not working for others, like I always think we got to get to those hearts and help them. Like that's the language and the science and helping to shift them, because I don't believe they're bad guys. They just are. They think if you would do what I would do, then you would have the experience that I'm having. And it isn't really like that, right?
No, right.
Because the system is working. And, it, you know, Chuck Price, who does some child welfare stuff up in Wisconsin, he's amazing. He always says, you know, the systems need fed. And what do the systems eat? They eat people. I was like, oh my gosh, you know. Matthew, this has been... I just can't believe that I'm talking to you. I've watched your Edutopia video, have so many teachers like look at you guys and see what you're doing. And I'm like, so tap in, tap out. Tell me about some of the things you guys have learned about that.
Wait, you just start interviewing me. I don't think that's how this is. Yeah, I would love to tell you, because I think right now, I've been doing a lot of talks about we're in the midst of opportunity. And this is one of those opportunities that can be done literally tomorrow. And what we've done with Tap In and Tap Out is we've moved to our communication to an app called GroupMe. It's a free app, you know, so people don't have to share their cell phone numbers. You know, it doesn't bother me, but some people like, I prefer not to. It's a boundary. I want to say, okay, fine, let's use GroupMe. So we use GroupMe. And it's a time to promote co-regulation and adult regulation, right? So for whatever reason, and I've been very open about this, my mom passed away less than 2 weeks ago. And I've spent a lot of time away from my school. And leading up to her passing, I could feel myself dysregulated. I knew, because now I've done this work long enough, I know what my body feels like. I know what my heart feels like. I know what my breathing is doing. I know when I'm like, I'm just irritated. No. This is absolutely stress right now. It gives an opportunity for any adult in the building to say, I just need a minute. Like, I know I'm not okay. I need a minute. Whether a child is escalated and I've become escalated and I can't de-escalate, that's one. I'm simply escalated and a student is not escalated. That's a 2. And 3, I just need a minute. And all it is literally they go to their phone on a GroupMe and they say, I need to tap out. Somebody's coming. Most of the time it's multiple people. They'll step in, give that teacher a second. The second adult will say, hey, do you want me to go with you? Do you need me to be there? And they'll either say yes or no. An adult comes in, just takes the class, and we give teachers a minute just to take a minute. And I think that is a game changer. It's a game changer.
It's huge. And sometime I'd love to talk to you more, because I think, especially in our small rural schools, like they're like, we don't have enough people. Like, there's not enough people. Nobody's coming, you know? And so I'm like, is it really that there's not enough people, or is it that we need to overhaul some system stuff? Because, you know, that's a real root problem for our staff's health and well-being, is if nobody ever comes and they can never tap out, all that crap gets stored in their bodies
100%.
And they take it home at night, right? I mean,
or it comes out in the classroom.
It comes out in the classroom, right? It's going in, the river goes in or the river goes out. You know, I mean, it's just the way that works. And so I just really encourage schools that are listening, you know, when you want to start with trauma informed, you need to lay out the science in a compelling way. You can't bring people in that make folks want to fall asleep.
No.
You know? It's got to be compelling. It has to be full of stories and it has to be personal, right?
Exactly.
But the other thing is always start with staff well-being and staff co-regulation and staff co-care, because the teacher, I mean, what people can't hardly wrap their brains around is one more thing, right? But if you start to say, let's get you more regulated, let's get you into a place where you feel seen and heard and understood, then we have a better opportunity to take people to what's next.
And I think that's, we use The Leader in Me, which is based off of Franklin Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I think that was one of the powerful things. And we actually started the Trauma-Informed Journey and the Leader in Me journey at the same time because it made sense, right?
Yeah.
And the whole thing that Franklin Covey does is they start with the adults. You don't even talk about kids the first 2 days.
Right.
And they hammer in habit 7, which is sharpen the saw. You have to balance. And I think that there is power in understanding sharpening your saw. My staff knows that when I go to our little family 900 square foot cabin in the middle of nowhere, I'm not answering my phone. I'm not answering email because I can't. It actually doesn't work there. And I used to feel kind of bad about going there. And now it's like, oh no, I love, and I tell people I'm done. I mean, you can't get a hold of me. And I think that's why I continue to stay inspired and fired up and motivated to continue to do the work, because I'm investing in myself to invest in my staff, my families, and my students. So, I mean, I think that's so important. So Rebecca, if people want to get a hold of you, they want to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
So on Twitter, it's Poverty Edge. And on Facebook, it's Rebecca Lewis-Pankratz, which I think there's only one in the world because you get a hyphenated name, right? ESSDACK, it's resilienceteam.esdac.org. We've got a equipping resilience coaches coming up this summer, Matthew, that we do every year with Jim Sporleader. And that is really giving folks from Jim's book. We took his book and with him, and we made modules to go in and train in schools. So awesome. Resilience coaches come and they work with us in the summer, then they take the modules back and they really start the slow journey of transforming their schools, right? You need buy-in, you need administrator support to do this. So you can find that on resilienceteam.esdac.org. And then the school and family peace framework that's on there, Matthew, is that River of Cruelty experiential stuff that for those of you that are out there that have a lot of violence in your classroom, I really would just ask you to check that out, because I think there's some really important skills there to be developed and healing for folks.
And I've loved the work of ESSDACK. I've been able to speak at the conferences and attend and see your work. And you've actually helped, I don't know if you know, but Ginger actually helped us kind of organize the Trauma Informed Educators Network conference that's coming in July. She's like, let me help you and show you how to do this. And so we really appreciate the partnership of you guys and helping in that. And by the way, that is July 19th and 19th to the 21st of 2021. Registration is on sale. It is going to sell out. I can already see the trajectory. So do not wait. Please do not wait. And I'm super excited that we have two new partners. One of them was founded by Katie Dorn. She's a CEO and founder of Empower You. Then it's an organization dedicated to helping improve access to vital social and emotional skills and support by building student resilience, persistence, and success. There's proprietary social, emotional learning, mental health programs that are helping thousands of students and educators from kindergarten to higher ed. And you can find out about them on Empower You. And it is awesome. A lot of schools there's a white paper out there now about them and the work they're doing. And then Stop It Solutions is used to protect the physical and social and emotional safety and well-being of students, employees, and families by equipping them with a safeguard technology and education. They actually link students with caring adults to prevent the preventable and uncover the unseen. It's an intervention to help with them that's done virtually. So, I mean, we've got some great partners, and we have some amazing speakers and some amazing presenters, you being one of them.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So I cannot wait to get your session in there. We have Dr. Ricky Gibbs. He is a friend, a colleague, and his school was featured on The Promise by Nashville Public Radio that went on a national stage that talks about racial inequality and what my district was doing to try to integrate unintegratable schools. Is very powerful. If you have not listened to The Promise, I highly recommend it as a podcast. Then we have Charles Holt as another keynote speaker, who is a friend of mine. He has been, he's a previous Nashville resident. He now lives in New York. He was in the Broadway musical, The Lion King, Jesus Christ Superstar. And his story of resilience and power is one that you will not want to miss. And then we have a great panel of experts that's going to come and talk about this work in 48 sessions. 48 sessions, you all, and there's only going to be 300 people. And so it is going to be a time where what I like to refer to, the disruptors are uniting to connect to each other as a network, as well as learn new material. So Rebecca, thank you for being a part and sharing. I know your team is coming, and I cannot wait to see those sessions. And as always, you all, I forgot. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at Principalist on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Matthew Portell on Facebook and LinkedIn, where these are also being streamed. So thank you all. And as always, please, please, please wash your hands. And don't forget, even now, still to wear a mask. All right, Rebecca. Oh my goodness. I think we could talk for like another hour. Seriously. I am going to be reaching out about the family framework that you're talking about, because just the tidbits that you gave me were something that we've been having conversations at Fall Hamilton about. Just how do we get this information and experience to the educators?
Right. And there's some really important tools in there. There's some real deep understanding for the adults, like, oh, this is what's really going on. It's really about internal work, right? But there's also a funnel process in there that I think if we could learn to use the funnel on kids and get them down into that emotional energy. With teenagers I've been working with, Matthew, it takes me a while, but once I get those teenagers there one-on-one, like, they're like, I don't think I need to see you anymore. Like, I feel better. I mean, it doesn't happen that moment. Like, they're pretty messed up that moment. But then they're just like, oh, I just think there's a ton of emotional energy trapped in our kids.
You know, and I'm going to tell you a story. And apparently there's 6 people here listening. I'm sure there'll be more, but it's not going to be on the podcast. I can tell you the liberating story I had when I was a kid, and I was actually in my early 20s. I went to a really small parochial school and was hammered with all kinds of experiences through my whole school career. And I was told that I had to do something if I wanted to continue to play in this alumni basketball game. And I completely lost it. Matter of fact, I was reflecting with my dad after my mom passed. I said, Dad, do you remember that? Because we haven't really talked about it, because it was quite embarrassing for you. It was probably the most liberating experience of my life in my early 20s. It was because all of that pent up stuff came out. Now, socially, it looked really, really bad. But internally, it felt really, and honestly, it was the point in my life where I felt like, whew, I can breathe. Like, finally I can breathe. And I felt independent in myself and being able to stand in a space of confidence of who I am and being cool with that. But it's amazing how sometimes those little pieces, just when the catalyst happens, can change so much.
Yeah. And Matthew, I'm sure your story happened exactly like it's supposed to, and everything is for this time, right? But what if you didn't have to wait till you were 20 to get some of that stuff out of your body?
Oh my goodness. I think about it all of the time. I really do. I really think about it like, man, if I would have had the opportunity to understand all of what was happening in my mind and in my heart and in my emotions, how much, I don't want to say easier, because it's not about easy, but how much more understanding I would have gotten at an earlier age, because I didn't start teaching until I was 29. And that's because I had to work through a lot. I wasn't ready to be a teacher at 21, like many people. And I'm glad I waited till I was 29, because I wasn't in a state of maturity that I could have taken on the responsibility that I've taken on and taken so seriously the last 15 years. So, I mean, it's interesting, but I do think that I'm like, well, I really do think, man, if I would have started when I was 21, I would be close to retirement, but no. No, because I love what I do.
Oh my goodness. Well, Matthew, for whatever reason, you got to have this spotlight came to you, and you started to get folks, because with Jim, we got to see a high school, right?
Right.
With you, we got to see an elementary school and a traditional elementary school, and we got to meet your staff. And I just remember the first video I watched of you, and you were like, I'm going to tell you, last year was rough. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, and And it's that humility that helps us all feel safe to explore and try and get better. Yeah. And you've really been masterful And I don't think you've ever tried to be like that, at trying to build a team of staff around you that are just doing cool stuff. And I know it's hard. And I know they have brain issues. And I know as administrators, we get mad at teachers. Teachers are mad at kids. Like superintendents are mad at us. Like, I mean, I
Right.
get how the stress rolls down for people, but really at the end of the day, so thank you and all your staff, Matthew.
I will let them know because, and I'll be honest, I have an incredible staff, right? And I was telling the story today to a social worker that we now have full time, that we pay with our own school funds, and my school counselor. And I said, Dr. Schroeder's my school counselor. I call her Yoda because she is the keeper of all knowledge at my school and is the mastermind behind many, but refuses to get in front of a camera or in front of a microphone. But I was telling her, I said, do you remember like 2.5 years ago when I hit that wall? And Juliet was on this podcast and she was talking about how she had built a wall against staff because they didn't get it and it made her angry. And I was on that podcast and it was not a week later, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm there too. Like I'm literally there.
Right.
And so I pulled in some staff that can be brutally honest with me, which I love. And I said, tell me, like, what's your perception right now? And my staff said, you're an asshole right now. And I said, you're right. Like, You're totally right. And that was a moment, again, a paradigm shift of mine of like, and I even said it today, I can't get mad at people for not thinking and understanding how I do, because if that's the case, then I am in the same boat with what frustrates me, that people aren't willing to flex and bend and build capacity of others. And I have to help build capacity of others on a lot of levels, and not out of frustration, but out of that same mindset of, I know you're doing the best you can do right now. So let's see if there's a way that I can help bend and flex to get that point of going, man, this is working with us, or this is working with the kids. And so I live in a different space, and it's taken a long time, although I get frustrated. Who doesn't, right?
Right. And you know what, when I worked with a lot of principals, especially at the elementary level, and they keep talking about kids, and I'm like, and I get it. And it is all about the kids. I said, but you have to understand your staff are now your kids. You have to care for them in the way that you want them to care for the students.
That's right.
Because that's how this works. And superintendents should be caring for their principals in the way that the principals should be caring for the staff that care for the children, right? And the board should be caring for the superintendent in that way. But we got it all messed up. Like it's just fascinating to me. And I'm like, no, our models have to be concerned and still high expectations, right? Like
right, absolutely.
You screwed up. You can't talk to kids like that. And what do you need to do so that we can figure out a way to do it different, right? But I love you and I get it.
And what I've been saying is accountability without self-reflection can feel like an attack. It can.
Yeah.
And that goes with me too. When I get feedback or accountability for my leadership, and I don't truly try to take that time to self-reflect, it can easily feel like I'm being attacked, right?
Oh, it is a huge emotional energy. Like
it's
there's
like,
happens in our body. And I'm like, and I've had schools that do it too, Matthew, and they're like, oh, we asked all these questions and they dumped on us and and all this drama starts. And I'm like, you asked, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You asked, because there's so many leaders out there that aren't even asking because they think they know or they don't want to know, right? Like,
and we're fortunate too. In our district, we give faculty surveys, culture surveys twice a year. And I want to say what you said about the board and the superintendent. For probably the first time in my career, we have that alignment, right? God. And like, I'm not joking you, the day after my mother passed, now I'm one of 11,000 employees, my superintendent texted me condolences, and it wasn't from somebody else's phone. It wasn't a forum email. It was from her phone texting me 170 principals, just saying, hey, today when I was able to sit in on the mayor's announcement of, she was sitting behind me. And I looked back at a colleague, friend, and superintendent. And it's like, this is and our board, my board chair my board member was sitting next to her who mentors at my school, like mentors kids at my school. It's like, this alignment is something that I know and I cannot take for granted. And a lot of people do not have it. But I can proudly say that We do. Like, I do get to
That's
experience
amazing.
it. And I think that's why we can continue to innovate and do this work, because there is a direct alignment all the way down to our kids,
Safety.
even to our parents.
Safety.
100%.
Safety, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, not being known and not being seen, like that is it anyways. And so, well,
Yeah.
Matthew,
Thank you.
hope that I will be at your conference. And so
Yes.
I just can't wait to see some people. And we're going to do some of the school and family peace stuff there. So
well, hopefully people will come to those sessions. I will make sure that I am your host for that session.
Okay, cool.
Because I want to learn more, and I definitely want to encourage my staff to come and learn more. I say my staff. I hate when I say that. The staff that I work with, they're not mine. They're not mine. I just work next to them. So, yes, I will definitely look into that. Thank you so much. And I know we talked for like 20 minutes longer than I normally talk to people, but I think we could talk probably for days. And I might have to have you back on, and maybe even the whole ESSDACK team, to sit back and just have a conversation. So thank you so much. And Amanda Penn says thank you. It's one of the best conversations ever. So yes, thank you so much. And I will be producing the actual podcast. It could be tonight, and it probably will be tomorrow. But I appreciate your time so much. I know it's valuable, and I can't appreciate it enough. So,
Matthew, blessings, my friend. Can't wait till we see again soon. Okay, do I just jump out? Is that okay?
Yeah, I will end. Yes, I'm going to end broadcast, and then hold on just a second.